Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings NBA top plays for Tuesday, February 9th. We have three guys that we're going to talk about, but before we do that, I wanted to get into a little bit about, some of the game theory that goes along with the slate that we have tonight. There's only 5 games on the slate, so there's going to be a lot of overlap. The game that most people are going to be targeting is probably going to be the Golden State and Houston game, unless we do get news that James Harden is out, in which case that game is, probably one that's going to wind up as a blowout, and we might see a little bit less exposure to it than we think we will. As of now, though, if Harden is in, you got to think that that's going to be the highest scoring game on the slate and one that people are going to gravitate to no matter what the spread is. Now, there are 2 games on the slate that are also low scoring. Utah is one of them. Hold on one second. Let me call them up here so I can give you guys exactly. Let's see. We have, let me just refresh this. San Antonio and Miami. So that's 2 good defensive teams that play at a slower pace. 2 teams that usually don't give up a ton of points. So you can't really expect a lot of fantasy goodness to come out of that game. And the other one is the Utah-Dallas game. With the Twin Towers back, Utah is back to being one of the dominant defenses in the league. So you can't expect that to be a high score either. And both of those games are a 184 and a 193 total. So they're the 2 that you probably want to have the least amount of exposure to. Obviously, the Golden State-Houston game is the one most people are going to have. So in order to swerve for a GPP, I think the 2 games you want to really look at are Washington, New York, and Boston and Milwaukee. So let's call up the slideshow, talk about some of the guys that we highlighted here, and also some of the other guys we think you can use tonight. One of the guys who is my favorite play on the evening is going to be Draymond Green at 9,300. For those of you who want to figure out a way to fit in Steph Curry and James Harden, I think Raul Neto is going to be one of the top targets that people are looking at tonight in order to make that happen. And then another guy who I think is in a really good spot because of his matchup here and his price is Greg Monroe, who I also think is going to be highly used because he too provides a little bit of savings from some of the other guys in the price range. So let's talk about the first guy up here, and that's Draymond Green at 9,300. He's in a high total game and the highest pace game on the day against the Houston Rockets. The Rockets have been horrendous this season against the power forward position. If they're not the worst in the league at giving up points to power forwards, they got to be in the bottom 3 at this point. They were the worst when I looked about a week or 2 ago. So like I said, even if they have gotten a little better, they're still one of the teams that you want to try to pick on. Draymond Green is basically a triple-double threat every time he steps out on the floor. He's actually recorded 2 triple-doubles in his last 3 games. And even when he falls short, he very often winds up with double-doubles with, 12 or 15 points. He's not a huge scorer, but he'll get you, 10 to 12 rebounds. He'll get you 7 to 10 assists. So there are a lot of ways that he can rack up the fantasy points. He's actually top 10 in the league overall for assists, and that includes everybody. So even including a lot of the point guards in the league, he's ranked in the top 10. So you got a guy who can get you 10 rebounds a game, ranked in the top 10 in the league for assists, and usually finds his way into double-digit points just because of the number of minutes he stays on the floor. In his last 4 games, he's averaging 13 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. So this is a guy that can completely fill up a stat sheet for you in daily fantasy. It's a high total game, high-paced game against Houston. He's got one of the best matchups on the floor. His price is somewhat friendly at 9,300. I say that as a relative term compared to guys like James Harden and Steph Curry, who are the other ones that are going to be expensive, high-owned options in this game. So I do think Draymond Green is the guy that I like the most in this, Golden State Warriors-Houston matchup. Now, for people who are trying to fit in a bunch of these studs, you're going to need to find some value plays. And one of the guys who jumps out to me is Raul Neto. He's in a decent spot today against Dallas. Trey Burke is still injured, and Neto's averaging over 30 minutes per game in his last 5 without Trey Burke being in there to split minutes with him. He's given you a return of 5.6x or better in 5 straight games. His price is so cheap that he doesn't need to do a ton. He's only been averaging 11.5 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game over his last 5, but it's been good enough for 21 fantasy points and, a lot of 6x, 7x kind of cashes. If his price is still, only 3,600, he's one of the cheap guys that you can use to unlock the studs in order to have a big day. He's not going to give you that huge upside you need in order to win a tournament, but he's the guy that you could roster in order to fit in 2 guys like a Harden and and a Curry or a Draymond Green that do have the upside that can win you a tournament. The last guy we're going to talk about here is Greg Monroe. He's in a paced-up game against the Boston Celtics. The Celtics backcourt is very good. They're also very good at defending opposing backcourts, which means that the way you want to attack this Boston team is really with their big guys. They've been struggling to defend interior players all season long. Monroe does well against shorter big men. He's not a 7-footer. He's only about 6'10" himself, but he is very talented. So when he goes up against guys where he's not at a physical mismatch, it's usually when he has his best games. So up against a guy like Sully today, I think he'll be able to do some damage. Also going against a slower player like Kelly Olynyk, I think that's where Monroe's really going to shine and be able to put up some good points. He's a very consistent player. He's put up between 30 and 50 fantasy points in 14 straight games now. So even when he doesn't have a good game, he still doesn't wind up killing you, which is why I like him a lot in cash games today, and also as one of those guys that's a little bit cheaper that can save you some salary. There are some other guys in those games that we talked about earlier that we want to target. I think you can look at the guards on Boston. I think the guards on Boston are in a pretty good spot against Milwaukee. I think you can look at a lot of guys in that Washington and New York Knicks game. A guy like John Wall at the point for Washington should be able to put up some big numbers against Jose Calderon. On the flip side of that, you also have a really good small forward matchup for the Knicks. Carmelo Anthony going up against Otto Porter, who's one of the worst defenders in the league. So there is a lot of other ways you can go about it where, I know everyone is saying, oh, the way to win tonight is to get as many Golden State and Houston guys in there as you can. But you have 207 point spread in that 207 point total in that Washington Wizards Knicks game with only a 2-point spread. And you have a 208 point total in the Boston Milwaukee game with only a 4-point spread. So those games are going to be close and high scoring as well. So it's not like you only have to target guys on Houston and Golden State. My problem with only targeting guys in Houston and Golden State is, the guys that you really want to target are very expensive. If you want to get a Klay Thompson in there for his matchup against James Harden, you're paying almost $8K. If you want Harden in there, you're paying over $10K. Steph Curry's 10, 11,000, depending what site you're playing on. Even a guy like Dwight Howard, who I think is in a decent spot here on the other side of the game, $7,000, $8,000, depending on what site you're playing on too. So with all those expensive guys over there, you're not going to be able to fill out a very balanced roster where you like every player that you have. If you look at some of these other games, there's a lot of reasonably priced players on Boston, a lot of reasonably priced players in that Washington, New York Knicks games. And I think those games are going to see a ton of points and a fast pace as well. So like I said, it's not an automatic that you have to go Houston and Golden State. If you're looking to play in tournaments, I think it's actually beneficial to go away from that Houston Golden State game and try to find another way. If you're playing in cash, I do think you need some exposure to it, though, if only for the block, because a lot of other people are going to have big exposure to that game. So that basically sums up my thoughts for the Tuesday slate here for DraftKings NBA DFS. Thank you guys for joining us over at rotocurve.com. And as always, stay classy, DFS.